Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we are doing another pedal demo. We're doing the Baklengs by Pladask Elektrisk. This is a granular synth pedal, and for such a small pedal, it's pretty complicated. I really tried to make this a short video. I was hoping I'd give you a nice, quick, concise 10-minute video and then we just get on with our lives, but that didn't happen. It's way longer because that pedal is pretty complicated, but it's also pretty cool. So let's dive in and I'll show you what it does. So just to warn you right off the bat, this pedal is very complex. I find it as challenging as, a pedal like the Count of 5. And it's because all of these knobs interact with each other in very kind of strange and interesting ways. So I'm going to go over the controls, but I'm going to jump around a bit. I can't do it in a nice clockwise pattern because it doesn't make sense that way to do this demo. So why don't we start with the easiest control of them all, which is the bypass foot switch. So I'm going to start playing a loop. And obviously this foot switch turns on and off the pedal. Now I do want to mention that this switch is one of those momentary switches. So you can just hold it down, and while you're holding it down, it will activate the pedal, or you can just click it fast and it'll turn it on and turn it off. Now let's talk about the volume knob really quickly. Again, we're doing the easy ones. So the volume knob is the master volume of the pedal. Unity is around noon. On my pedal, it happens to be at around 12:30. The maximum gain on this pedal is about 16 dB, so if you really crank it, you can really boost your signal. Okay, let's go to the mix knob. That's pretty straightforward. This mixes in the wet and the dry signal. So let's turn it full wet so you can hear what the pedal's really doing. And again, I have this set up kind of as a basic delay, so this is as normal as the pedal is going to sound likely. Okay, let's talk about the modulation knob here. So this is a random frequency modulation, and this knob controls the depth of that modulation. Now this is only applied to the wet signal. You're really going to hear this strongly as I do this because we have this pedal set to full wet. It's really nice. It just adds a little bit of movement to your sound. And then finally, let's talk about this right toggle switch here. So this is an octave switch. So this will go up an octave, down an octave, and then the middle position means it's not doing an octave change. So let's listen to this. Now notice that when you change the octave, it does not reset the memory buffer. So that's an important point if you're toggling that while you're playing it. Okay, let's start talking about the clock knob. And this one is a little more complex. So this knob changes the DSP system clock frequency. And it changes it from 10 kilohertz to 50 kilohertz. I don't know what that means. What I do know is when you change this knob, you're changing the sampling rate, the grain size, the modulation speed, and the delay buffer length. If you turn the clock up, you're going to get a little more audio fidelity, and you're going to have a shorter buffer. If you turn it down, your audio is probably going to be a little noisier and maybe a little more sluggish, but you're going to have a longer buffer length. So if we adjust this knob while we're playing audio, you're going to hear that it's actually shifting the pitch of the audio. So that's a neat little trick if you want to turn knobs while you're performing. One thing I want to mention is that lower clock settings are going to produce some noise on the signal path, and they're going to give the time, the loop, and the octave parameters a bit of a sluggish response time. So let me show you what that means. And by the way, that's not always a bad thing. I'm going to crank the clock all the way to the top here. So now we have the highest frequency of our DSP as far as the clock frequency goes. So let's listen to how it handles the octave response. Now remember, we have the shortest buffer length at this clock setting. So you can hear how the octave is sitting within the loop, right? You hear it's, playing a little bit after, it's a little bit delayed. Now listen to how it sounds when I turn the clock all the way down. So now we're going to talk about the time knob. Now, this is another knob that is not as simple as it seems at first glance. So this knob handles the delay time and the time stretch parameter. However, there's a couple markings on here I want you to see. So there's a 0, and then at noon, you'll see it says TS. And then all the way at the right, it says FRZ. Well, TS means time stretch, and FRZ means freeze. So let's go over that. So from full counterclockwise to noon, you increase the delay time. So let's listen to that. And I'm actually going to change the mix to about, 55%, so you can hear it play with the loop and you can hear what it's doing. Here is our shortest delay time. It's getting longer. Now, once we hit noon, this knob starts controlling the amount of time stretching. And once you go to the maximum clockwise position, the audio playback speed is frozen. So now we have full mix. So now you're hearing a freeze that's happening. So after noon, but before turned all the way to the right, it's doing time stretching. And from 0 to noon, it's just giving you a delay time. So this is a little complex compared to, some other pedals that we all have, but it's once you get your hands around, like afternoon, it's time stretching, and all the way to the right, it's freeze. Before noon, it's kind of like a delay pedal. That seems to help me thinking of it that way. Now here's a tricky thing. So the memory size range depends on the clock parameter. So remember, this changes your buffer length, okay? So let's listen to what this does. So we're gonna set our delay time to the fastest possible. And now we're gonna make our buffer length fastest possible. Or shortest possible, should I say. So now you have the shortest buffer length and the shortest delay time. Let's make the buffer length the longest possible. So you hear the interplay going on there. So this is the longest buffer length. Now let's turn it to the shortest buffer length. So you can definitely hear the difference there, and I hope this is coming across. Again, there's a tonal quality to the pedal that changes as you change that clock knob. It gets a little brighter, it gets a little more digital sounding, honestly, which is weird. The higher the clock is, I feel like it sounds brighter, a little more brittle, and a lower clock actually sounds chewed up and slightly noisy, but in a good way. So you can kind of get a slight tonal variance depending on how you have the clock set, but you're also getting a different interaction with your time knob here. And now if we get into time stretching, so now we have the full freeze going on. And you know what? Let's try on a little octave. So this is with the clock all the way up. Let's turn the clock all the way down. Okay, so now that brings us to this middle toggle switch, and this is the directional toggle. So this selects between reverse, shuffling, and forward granular delay or stretch. So reverse is over to the left. Now this is not a true reverse delay. It's an effect where the grains of the audio are arranged in reverse. So that is different than a normal reverse delay. So here's the forward delay. Also, I want to mention that when you do turn this, when you move this toggle, the memory buffer is reset. So that's why you're hearing that when I flip it. So let's talk about the middle position here, which is the shuffle position. So when you adjust the time mode in this position, it does seem a little odd. So similar to the reverse and forward modes, the audio is frozen when the time is at the max, right? Turning it counterclockwise from here allows the stretching to wander around in the memory buffer with increasing speed. So the shuffle mode it's almost like a chaos mode, right? It just kind of reorganizes the pieces of the memory buffer. And as you get closer to noon, the speed will increase of that shuffle. Forward. Shuffle mode. Okay, and finally, we are at the loop section. Now this section actually comprises the knob, the loop knob, this toggle switch, and this foot switch. So just kind of think of that as all one section. So the loop knob is basically the decay parameter. So at noon, there's no regeneration. You would think if you have it at 0, it would have no regeneration, but that's not how this pedal works. So at noon, there is no regeneration. When you turn it clockwise from noon, you're going to add non-destructive looping feedback. So let's try to hear that. So here's noon. No regeneration. We're turning it clockwise. We're starting to hear that non-destructive looping feedback. Now, what does non-destructive mean? So that means that the modulation and the octave effects are not going to be regenerated. So you'll have the same modulation depth and pitch at every repeat cycle. And when you turn this to maximum, the audio is repeated indefinitely, and it does allow new audio to be written to the memory as well. Again, back to noon, there's no regeneration. Okay, so it's really important with this knob to remember that you may think to yourself, oh, I should turn it to 0 if I don't want any decay, but that's not how this knob works. This knob, noon is no decay. Now, if we decrease it, we get direct destructive feedback. This will regenerate the granulation, the modulation, and the octave of the wet signal. So let me show you what that means. Okay, so let's add some octave to this. We'll add the upper octave because that's easier to hear what it's doing. Okay, so now we hear that. So now we're going to go towards the non-destructive looping feedback. Now you can hear that the octave hasn't changed. It hasn't gone higher, which means the octave setting hasn't taken the shifted octave and shifted it again and again and again infinitely. If we turn counterclockwise past noon, now you hear it is doing that. Now you hear it's taking your octave shift up and it's shifting it up again and again and again. I'm going to turn off the octave switch. I'm going to turn on the modulation and let you hear that. Same deal with the modulation, right? Non-destructive, which means it's not going to remodulate itself. Destructive, so you can hear the modulation is just modulating itself and getting crazier and crazier and crazier. So compare that sound with this sound. Let's turn off the modulation for a second because now I want you to hear this a little more clearly. We're going to talk about the left foot switch. So the left foot switch is a little similar to the Fabricant in that it controls a setting on a toggle. Okay, so we have the loop toggle and the left foot switch. These two are kind of married. So here's the deal. When you hit this left foot switch, you're going to override whatever you have this knob set to with the setting on the toggle switch. Okay? So if you'll notice, there are some icons on the loop knob. This icon on the left, this icon on the right. So the icon on the left is basically the maximum destructive feedback. So if we turn our little toggle to the left and we hit that, well, guess what's happening? The setting of the loop knob has been changed to what this is set to, and this is set to maximum destructive feedback. Now we're back to no decay. If we move the toggle to the middle position, as you can see, it matches that little icon there. So if we turn it on, now you're getting maximum looping feedback that's not destructive. And once again, if you have, for example, the octave turned on, well, if we go to the destructive, you hear the octaves just cascading like crazy and turning it into super chaos. If you go to the center position, now you have maximum non-destructive feedback. You don't hear the octave cascading. And again, the modulation will do the same thing, where it will cascade out of control depending on if you have it destructive or non-destructive. There's one more setting I want to point out to you, and that is this setting on the right. You'll see that it is the same symbol as the non-destructive maximum looping feedback. I'm sorry, I hope this jargon is making sense. There's a little box around it, and what that means is that when you have this setting enabled, you're not allowing new audio to be written to the memory. So when the box isn't there, new audio can hit it. When the box is there, it's protected. New audio cannot hit it. So that's how I think of it, is kind of new audio coming at that symbol, and if there's a box around it, it can't enter it and affect it. I hope that helps, and I'll try to do some graphic thing on the screen to show that. I've had a very hard time describing what this pedal is, and honestly, to me, I consider it just a sandbox pedal. When I first got this thing, I thought it was going to be a simplified Fabricant. I really didn't know what I was getting, and I was very incorrect about that. It's not a simplified Fabricant. This thing is filled with possibilities, and because all of these knobs interact with each other, you just have all these subtle variations on what the pedal can do and what it can sound like. I was pretty lucky. I managed to snag the red-green version of this pedal, the little Christmas Baklengs pedal. But I know that they may not be available and maybe they'll be hard to find or get in this color scheme. So just to warn you about that. The power requirements on this pedal are 9 volt, but they're 150 milliamps. So it's a little bit higher than your normal, like Boss pedal. So you might want to keep that in mind. The power supply you need is going to be a little beefier than maybe your just kind of standard one you have sitting around. So thanks again, everyone. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe. It really helps. So what's next for the channel? I'm going to be working on some ambient songs. And as far as pedal-related stuff, I don't really have any new pedals to demo right now. I do want to mention, however, that TC Electronic has this sustainer pedal that they've released, but getting a hold of one seems to be a little challenging right now. But I'm doing my best to get that, so maybe that will be my next demo, but that might be a little bit in the future. So until then, I hope some cool new pedals come out. I'm really hoping a new pedal by Maris comes out because I don't have any Maris pedals yet, and I feel like that's a mistake on my part, and I'd really, really like to try one next. So hopefully that will be the next pedal demo, but that assumes they're going to come out with something. But enough of that. You all have a great week, and thank you very much for watching the video. I'll see you next time.